Hey everybody, we are getting ready to start our day 2 reading lesson for this week. I hope that you guys are doing well, and I hope that you have a comfy spot where you can focus and get ready to do our learning for today. So let's get started. All right, so what we are working on today is we're going to be looking back at our story, A New Hoop, but today I can describe a character's perspective in a story. So I have to remember what perspective means. Do you guys remember? And if you said it's how a character thinks or feels about something, then you are correct. So today we're going to be thinking about our characters, Kim and Marco, and we'll be thinking about their perspective in the story. All right, so our first question to think about today is what does Marco think about reusing recyclable things? And as we are thinking about that, we want to figure out what does Marco do in the story and what does he say that helps me to determine his perspective on this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to page 350 as they start talking about reusing recyclable things. And I'm going to be reading and thinking about this question. What does Marco think about reusing recyclable things? And our strategy is we're going to reread to see what does he do and say to figure out his perspective. I'm going to be looking today for 3 details that will support and show his perspective on that. All right, so let's get to our reading of this page. As I'm reading, make sure that you are following along and paying attention in the text and thinking about his perspective. All right, Marco stared at all the old stuff. That gives me an idea, he said. Mr. Morris, do you have anything we could reuse to make a basketball hoop? Mr. Morris picked up a plastic laundry basket. We were going to recycle this basket, but I think it's reusable. Well, thinking about the beginning of this page, I see that it said that Mr. Morris, do you have anything we could reuse to make a basketball hoop? So that's showing me he's interested in reusing something. So that's a detail that I might be able to use. So in fact, I might add that to my chart here and say, Marco asked Mr. Morris if he has anything that they could reuse to make a basketball hoop. That's telling me about how he thinks or feels about using recyclable things. Well, let's keep reading and see if we can find anything else. It looks useless, old and cracked, said Kim. No, it could be useful, said Marco. We could cut off the bottom to make a fine hoop, and then an adult can help us attach it to the post. Well, something that Marco just said gave me an idea about what he thinks about reusing recyclable things. I could maybe use this detail right here. No, it could be useful, said Marco. We can cut off the bottom to make a fine hoop, and I might add that detail to my chart here as evidence. So I could say, Marco thinks the basket could be useful and could be used to make a fine hoop because the basket is something that is recyclable that he wants to reuse. All right, let's keep going, see if we can find a third piece of evidence. Kim frowned. I want a new basketball hoop, she said, not someone else's hand-me-down. Why? Wondered Marco. Reusing things is a great way to practice conservation. It stops waste. I guess we can try, said Kim, but I still don't believe it will be as good as a new one. So something else that Marco has said here makes me believe that he feels a certain way. He says, reusing things is a great way to practice conservation. It stops waste. So that kind of tells me, again, how he feels about reusing recyclable things. And I could add that detail to my chart here. I could say that Marco thinks that reusing things is a great way to practice conservation. So when I think about all of these details from the text, the things that Marco said and that things that he did in the text, I might be able to determine his perspective, what he thinks about reusing recyclable things. Let's go back and look at our details and see if we can figure out what they're all telling us about. So Marco asked Mr. Morris if he has anything they could reuse to make a basketball hoop. So he wants to reuse something to make a hoop. Marco thinks the basket could be useful and could be used to make a fine hoop. So he wants to use a basket now to make the hoop. And Marco thinks that reusing things is a great way to practice conservation. So I feel like all of these things are telling me that Marco thinks that, reusing recyclable things, it's a great idea. And it's good for practicing conservation. So I might use that to fill in Marco's perspective right here. I could say, Marco thinks that reusing recyclable things is a great idea and a good way to practice conservation. So I have answered the question and supported it with 3 details that show me what Marco says or does in the text that proves his perspective. So I want you guys to try it now, your turn, with your question, which is going to be this right here, which says, what does Kim think about reusing recyclable things at the beginning of the story? So reread, what does she do, and say to determine her perspective. I have a typo there. I will fix that. So what you guys are going to do is I would like you to reread this page that we have just worked on, and I would like you to find 3 details that would prove Kim's perspective. So your job today is to determine her perspective and describe what she said or did in the story that would prove that. You guys will find this assignment in your Google Classroom for today, Tuesday. And if you need anything or have questions, just send me a message, but submit it when you are finished. Good job and good luck with your assignment, and we'll see you later.